Hello, and welcome to, today is the 12th of Decem-Baron 2020, and this is going to be a bit of a shorter one today. I don't have a single grand campaign story to share today, more like just a handful of small ones. I would like to talk a little bit about rather short-lived campaigns that I had. Ones where I started with a fun idea, and it certainly could have been a far... Wow, I nicked myself there. I'll be okay. But anyway, ones where the idea was fun and everything, but, you know, one well-known thing about Dungeons & Dragons, or tabletop role-playing games in general, is that if you play them long enough, you will come to realize that people's schedules are the bane of most campaigns. And that's generally what happened with these. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about very, very early on, like in my first year of playing Dungeons & Dragons, after I had a couple of campaigns under my belt, I found a campaign on YouTube, which was a 4 or 5 episode thing where it was Pokemon D&D. That's what it was. What they did was they didn't so much use the actual Pokemon creatures. They just took the idea of Pokemon and applied it to the fantasy setting of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, there are certainly a couple of settings. There are a couple of settings out there that basically rules that allow you to play Pokemon like the actual what you imagine as Pokemon. There are Pokemon tabletop RPGs out there created by fans. Like they're just fan works or whatever. There's nothing official. But I thought it'd be fun to try to do the same thing in a D&D campaign, where something called Pockets and Monsters, set in the same world as, my world that I had created for Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons, a brief recess beneath the rubble, and Call of the Grim Wild, Blood, Smoke, and Mirrors. That same world, I thought it'd be fun to try for Pockets and Monsters, which was the name I gave to this particular campaign. So, some of my roommates at the time in college joined me in that, and we had a couple of sessions of it. It just didn't last very long because of people's schedules just weren't lining up. Really, things just weren't really happening. So what I do have, however, is I do have notes of basically only about 3 sessions happened, or maybe only 2 sessions happened actually, and then I kind of created a sort of epilogue or whatever. So I'm just going to go ahead and read those to you. And I didn't have a grand idea or anything. It was just I had this just sort of this thought to, you could. Well, what I did was, instead of using actual Pokemon, even though someone did make stat blocks for the actual first 150 Pokemon for Dungeons & Dragons, what I decided to do was look in the monster manual of Dungeons & Dragons and kind of think, okay, if you have this monster, if it evolved, what would it look like? For example, a small clockwork thing would evolve into a Gorgon, which in Dungeons & Dragons is a large bull made of iron, that kind of thing, or a small twig blight evolving into a tree ant, things, stuff like that. I basically applied the principle of Pokemon capturing monsters into the actual monsters in Dungeons & Dragons. So here's what we had. I basically have 3 chapters and an epilogue here, because even though this is short-lived, I still think there were some fun ideas and some fun things that happened in Pockets and Monsters. So here we go. Flames in Frenic. It is the year 50 VP, 50 Vernal Portal, 50 years after the Vernal Portal of Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons, and a newly developed technology is taking the nation by storm. An enterprising halfling known mostly for his leadership in the sweetmeat factory and his Sweet Beats music business invented a way to capture and store candy and toys in metal spheres the size of grapefruits. They were called Jawbreaker balls after their inventor, because the inventor's name was Jawbreaker the Glossy, who appeared in Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons. Named after their inventor, as well as their cream-colored and speckled appearance. So they actually looked like grapefruit-sized jawbreakers that could open. Once the balls were made available, people used them for more than their intended use, most notably to capture and tame monsters. It wasn't long before pocket monster battles became incredibly popular. Soon, all the adventurous youngsters and a few older folks were interested in buying a few balls to participate in this new craze. Tournaments were soon organized, and the country had the makings of a major league within a year of the release of Jawbreaker's renamed invention, Monster Balls. This new sensation inspired others to travel across the land, searching far and wide for the center of pocket monster action. We begin the adventure with 4 young travelers from the southern realms. Kessler, a human trained in the metallic arts of the Mistborn. This particular player was a fan of the Mistborn novel series. Mistborn is a series of books by Brandon Sanderson. I haven't read a Mistborn book myself, but I have read some of Brandon Sanderson's other books, such as Elantris and Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians and the Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians series. But the Mistborn series is among Brandon Sanderson's most popular. And the idea of one of the main ideas of like people in the Mistborn books is that they're able to consume metal, and depending on the metal they consume or absorb, they're able to use that metal to have some sort of magical powers of some kind. And so the metallic arts of the Mistborn, also known as allomancy. So that's what Kessler had, and this particular player just really loved it and worked with me to try to figure this out. So like most of my campaigns in this stage of my DMing, it was homebrew. So yeah, Kessler was human trained in the metallic arts of the Mistborn, or allomancy. He travels with a sense of justice. Having survived a near-death experience, he decided that a pocket monster quest in the tournament circuit up north would be the perfect way to begin to develop his abilities. Rather cocky, arrogant, and chaotic, Kessler nevertheless cares deeply about his friends and seeks to further the cause of good with his special abilities. Benaya is a wood elf ranger from the forest on the far south. More than anything, he is very fascinated by this new pocket monster craze that he's heard so much about. He has a simple mission: to be the very best in all that he does. Papercut the Knee Stabber is a halfling rogue with a personal vendetta against monsters. His village was raided, his parents were killed, and his life was ruined at an early age. At the center of this destruction, the halfling-run Mob Fia. As an orphan in the streets, Papercut got in trouble with the Mob Fia and decided to go up north to hunt for monsters, fight the mob, and get his life back. Bardeed is a fun-loving human bard with very simple desires: to explore the world and every new thing he finds. Right now, he wants in on the pocket monster action. With a lute in hand and a song in his throat, he ran into the other young adventurers and joined them to the northern nation. This party of 4 were aware the first real sign of civilization they would find would be a village known as Frenic. It was here that they hoped to secure licenses that would allow them to capture wild monsters legally. As they approached the village, they noticed towers of black smoke. Upon closer inspection, the party found the entire village burned to the ground. Well, everything except for a few modest houses at the far north side. Out on the streets was a cloaked man bending over something on the ground. The players approached the man, who introduced himself as Magus, the inspector detective. According to Magus, the fire started at around midnight. Everyone in the village was able to escape safely in the nearby town of Horrington, but the cause of the fire is a mystery. By the way, Horrington, that town exists in this world because the Betterborn character from Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons, the alchemist, his backstory was, he said that the player said his character was from a town called Horrington, which had an alchemist academy. So I'm like, cool, that's in the world, great. Anyway, but the cause of the fire is a mystery. All Magus could find so far were a dozen or more dead crows and small piles of straw that didn't burn. The party decided to help Magus by exploring the houses that were intact. In the first house they tried, a scared, squeaky voice shouted at them to leave them alone. The players entered the house to find a cowering halfling. Once the halfling realized he was among friendly folk, he introduced himself as Lolly. Magus asked Lolly what he knew about the fire. The halfling's trembling reply revealed that he saw what looked like a cackling scarecrow that escaped to a small grove of trees just west of the village. When the adventurers said they were looking for pocket monster licenses, Lolly revealed that he was the one in Frennick to give out those documents. He agreed to give each player a license if they could capture or destroy the scarecrow. He gave them one monster ball to help. He gave them one monster ball to help them. One monster ball total. Magus decided he would stay behind to investigate the other houses, which were all found to be empty. Lolly was so scared he never noticed anyone else had left. Our four would-be heroes venture to the nearby grove and soon hear a strange voice. It was coming from the scarecrow. It was sitting on a stump, muttering it to itself. Paradox. In my gourd, I have flame. I am Flare Crow. By the way, this whole Flare Crow thing was a story that I had created in my head that I didn't really have much of a use for anywhere else. I thought it'd be fun to just sort of insert it in here for kind of the beginning of an adventure. So, anyway, which was inspired, by the way, by a story I heard like years before of someone who played Dungeons and Dragons and came across a scarecrow who could cast fire magic and was resistant to fire. So I thought that was a cool idea, and I came up with this thing. Anyway, the party approached the Flare Crow and tried to talk with it. The creature seemed to have a childish understanding of the world, except this child could throw fire. What was more, it didn't burn, not even the bits of straw that gave it form. The strange creature did mention that it was created by a farm boy who knew a little bit of magic. However, the Flare Crow, with a wicked grin on its pumpkin face, seemed intent on wandering the world to have some fun. With a little luck, Kelsier threw the monster ball from behind the Flare Crow and took it by surprise. The Flare Crow was captured inside the monster ball. Excuse me. I'm good. The party returned to the remains of Frennick to find Magus exploring the streets some more, with Lolly close by. When they noticed the adventurers approaching, Lolly leaped for joy, and Magus was curious about the scarecrow creature. He asked to see it. Excuse me. Though the party was hesitant, they decided to ready their weapons and surround the ball before they opened it. Once the Flare Crow was released, it flung fireballs with a fiery fury. The Flare Crow turned out to be a formidable foe. It took Paper Cut the Knee Stabber out of commission. Benaya was getting unlucky with his bow and arrow, and Bardied was struggling to do some real damage. Every move that Kelsier made, he tried to make as epic as possible. High jumps, throwing metal furniture, etc., with varied success. At long last, the Flare Crow was taken down and recaptured, and all was silent and smoldering again. Magus and Lolly were shocked, but very grateful. Lolly followed through on his promise and gave a license to each of the heroes, as well as one monster ball each, not including the one he had given them for the Flare Crow. Everyone decided to travel to Horrington so Lolly could join the rest of his village, so Magus could interrogate the farm boy he suspected, and so the party could officially start their journey as pocket monster trainers. Chapter 2. Halflings in Horrington. Our heroes leave Frennick with their new pocket monster licenses and monster balls, walking north toward Horrington. Magus is with them, hoping to find the farm boy responsible for the creation of the Flare Crow. Horrington can be classified as a town. It's more than a village, but less than a city. The most prominent feature of the town is Horrington Academy, which specializes in the study and advancement of alchemy for scientific and peaceful purposes. It is also in this town that a pocket monster tournament will soon be held. The party, along with Magus, finds the farm boy first, and Magus is able to quickly wrap up the case. Turns out that the boy was experimenting with magic in his spare time. He went so far as to try to animate a scarecrow and thought it would be a fun challenge to get it to throw fire on its own. Clearly, the boy didn't think things through. The Flare Crow is still in the custody of the players, and Magus allows them to keep it for use in the tournaments. With that out of the way, the next thing to do is to figure out how to register for the tournament. They find a tavern, the Chemical Reaction, and that's the name of it, the Chemical Reaction, and look around for interesting characters. They see mostly humans and halflings hanging around, with the occasional dwarf or elf. The most interesting characters turn out to be a pair of oddly dressed halflings at a table together, as well as a lone Goliath at his own table. A Goliath is a towering, kind of mountain man. Not human, but yeah. They look very much like humans, but they're much taller and stronger. Anyway, the Goliath is downing half a keg's worth of ale and beating out a few rhythms on his tribal drum. The players approach the Goliath first. He is Dothrash, a teenage Goliath druid from the Elkwyn clan, which resides in the very far north. Dothrash is a new player, by the way. Though young, he already stands at 6 feet tall, and his bright eyes, one a pearly white, the other colored like a ruby, augment his intimidating or perhaps comedic nature. Dothrash welcomes the group eagerly and is thrilled to discover that they, like him, are looking to get into the Pocket Monster tournaments. Back at home, Dothrash heard his tribal leader and the shaman tell of visions of strange things in the far south, visions of capturing monsters and battling them for sport. Young, rebellious, and insanely curious, Dothrash left the tribe without permission, in the cover of night, hoping to make a name for himself in the exotic southern lands. He decides to join the party. Of the two halflings, one is wearing glitzy, shiny, colorful clothing that catches the eye immediately. The bright, clashing colors are reflected on the shiny, cybernetic arm fitted on the other halfling. When the party approaches, the colorful halfling, calling himself Jawbreaker with equally colorful language, by colorful language I mean, hey, what are you Teffers doing here? You're here to try your skill at the Teffin Pocketmon tourney? Teff, or teffing, is a expletive I made up entirely. It started with Jawbreaker, with you Teffin Teffers gonna Teffin do that? That kind of thing. Anyway, Jawbreaker welcomes them enthusiastically. He introduces the group to his cousin, Pith. It turns out these two halflings are in charge of the second annual Horrington Pocket Monster Tournament. The halflings explain that the tournament has no entry fee and only Tier 1 monsters are allowed into the battles. I kind of called the evolutions Tier 1, 2, and 3, so that's how they were organized. All this is meant to allow beginners to break into the Pocket Monster scene. Also, there are no individual battles. Participants are to enter as teams. There's a small cash reward and a badge of honor offered for the team that wins. The tournament is to begin the next morning. The players are excited to get out and catch some Pocket Mons. Jawbreaker even offers 2 additional monster balls to each of them, hinting that he was the one who invented them. This is especially useful as the players discover that the Flare Crow is considered a Tier 2 monster, which is too strong for this tournament. So, each of the players decide to break off from the group, venturing into the tall grass outside of town to try their luck and skill. Kelsier consumes some metal when he sees a giant owl perched atop a boulder. Now, I will say that one key difference here is that because these are adventurers, they are able to battle the monsters themselves instead of having a starter monster. So, so although the owl got a bit out of reach at times, Kelsier was able to fight the fowl to the ground and capture it as its own. So now Kelsier has a giant owl. Benaya, bow and blade at the ready, runs into a small, squarish metal creature. It speaks back to him in some sort of robotic language. They fire arrows at each other, but the creature, a duo drone, was no match for the elf's superior abilities. Papercut the Knee Stabber had a harder time of it, running into a giant spider that knocked him out easily. Kelsier was nearby and helped the poor halfling with his catch. Evidently, there were too many knees for Papercut to stab. The spider's poison didn't help either, but eventually, with some assistance, Papercut managed to claim the spider for himself. Bardied, free-spirited bard as he was, started his search for a monster, finding and capturing a warhorse. However, there were many other sights and sounds in and around the town that caught his attention, so the rest of the party didn't see much of him the entire day. Dothrash found a winged kobold. Due to his superior strength and height, it was an easy battle for the Goliath. At the end of the day, the group came together and met with the halflings once again, this time to officially register for the tournament. Jawbreaker and Pith were impressed and signed them on, with the exception of Bardied, who was distracted with other interests. I'm pretty sure this was basically like the player was not available after this point. The 4 players in the team decided to call themselves something epic, something that would last them through their ascent up the Pocket Monster battle circuit, a name to intimidate and inspire. The Elite Four. And now we move on to Chapter 3, Winners in Wosington. At last, the second annual Horrington Pocket Monster Tournament was set to begin. The players were thrilled to finally participate in their first Pocketmon battles. All 4 of them entered the Horrington Academy building. Bardied was nowhere to be found, having run off pursuing other interests, so the group remained as the Elite Four. So yeah, this player, things kept coming up for him. There was a large assembly hall in which the battles would take place. Pith the Glossy, the cyborg halfling the party met the day before, was the commentator of the tournament. The players were checked in after they bought a few healing potions, and they were told to wait in a side room as their battle was second in the order. Because there were only 3 teams entered in this tournament, if they won their battle, they would win the tournament. Because there was one battle before them, and so the team that won that first battle would go against the Elite Four, essentially. Despite the small size of participants, the whole town was in attendance. It was a large, exciting spectacle for those native to Horrington. The players decided to relax in the room until they were called to come out for their battle. Ladies and gentlemen, on the deciding battle, we have on the challenger side, the Elite Four! Cheers from the crowd. And on the defending side, please welcome back our very own Team We Teffin' Rocket! So, We Teffing Rock It. So, We Teffin' Rocket! Pokemon fans can probably see the obvious pun in there. The crowd goes wild. Team We Teffin' Rocket was a team of halflings with Jawbreaker Glossy as its leader. It's clear that Jawbreaker was a real star in this area. He still sports his glitzy outfit with the addition of pink-tinted spectacles. He steps forward from the other 3 members of his team to shout cheerleading instructions to the crowd with great speed and confidence. You say team, I say Teffin, you say rocket. Ready? Team! Team, we Teffin' Rocket! Team, we Teffin' Rocket! Team, we Teffin' Rocket! Team, we Teffin' Rocket! Yeah. Kelsier uses his Riot ability to... so Kelsier has an ability called Riot, and he uses that ability to riot Jawbreaker's self-doubt in an effort to... riot meaning like augment Jawbreaker's self-doubt in an effort to break the confidence of the other team. Plus, he was a bit annoyed with the halfling's whole act. The subtle spell was enough to make Jawbreaker stop shouting as his confident expression gave way to confusion. However, the crowd didn't seem to notice as they were too busy continuing Jawbreaker's chant, Team Rocket! Team Rocket! Eventually, the cheering died down and the match could finally begin. There was a flat 40 by 40 foot area for the monsters to battle, and all of the trainers were to stay out of it and command their monsters from the edge of the fight zone. The players brought out their monsters, a giant owl for Kelsier, a duo drone for Benaya, a giant spider for Papercut, and a winged kobold for Dethrash. Jawbreaker's team released 4 Mephits. Mephits are little elemental creatures. A magma Mephit, a smoke Mephit, an ice Mephit, and a dust Mephit. Note, although the black Mephit is... there were... I guess I just... I had a... right. I had an image for myself for reference. So I was just... yeah, the image had what looked like a mud Mephit, but it had the same color as... So yeah, there were different colors. Magma was... there's this red magma Mephit. There was this like blackish ash-colored smoke Mephit, a nice blue clear ice Mephit, and a brown dust Mephit. The Mephits were tiny, but they put up a fight. The players weren't too worried about the little elemental sprites until they defeated one of them. Once the magma Mephit was knocked out, it exploded, causing fire damage to all the monsters nearby. This caused the players to be more cautious about how they directed the attacks and movement of their monsters. A few explosions of ice, dust, and smoke later, the players were victorious against Jawbreaker's Team We Teffin' Rocket. The crowd went nuts throughout the fight, which offered advantages towards those creatures that attacked with style and drama. So yeah, so if you did well for the crowd, I gave advantages, so giving some incentive to do well, basically, to appeal to the crowd. Pith awarded the players with a modest sum of money, as well as the Horrington Tournament badge, which was an H in front of an alchemy beaker filled with bubbly green liquid, and encouraged them to travel farther north to the capital city of Wosington and register for the next tournament at the Judiciary. Before the players left Horrington, they looked for a place to heal their monsters. They found a center dedicated to that purpose. Inside, they met a female drow, a dark-skinned elf with white hair. She had pink highlights in her hair and introduced herself as Joynil. So, even though I shared the brief Recess Beneath the Rubble campaign earlier this month, this is actually the first time that Joynil appeared. In A Brief Recess Beneath the Rubble, I had Sovalis and Joynil, the husband and wife, ambassador drow duo. But this is where Joy-Nil first appeared. That's why her name is Joy-Nil, because of Nurse Joy from the Pokemon series. I had this female drow with dark elf with pink highlights in her hair. Anyway, she took the players' monsters, each inside their monster balls, rested them on round notches in a machine behind the front desk, and started to operate the machine by turning a crank. As Joy-Nil cranked the healing mechanism, colorful lights and pleasant sounds of bings and dings started to emit from the machine. Once the monsters had been magically healed, Joy-Nil returned the monsters to the players. "Come again soon," she chirped. Dithrash, taken aback by her pleasing voice and exotic beauty, wanted to play a little beat on his tribal drum, swinging his hips a little as he walked out of the center. Wosington wasn't too far away from Horrington, and it wasn't hard to miss, although its imposing walls and regal rooftops were dwarfed by the shadow of Capitol Mountain just north of it. There was a bit more steam and smoke coming from the buildings here than in the town of Horrington, and the largest smokestacks came from the west side of Horrington in the Sweetmeats factory. The players were welcomed in by the city guards. Found out very quickly how easy it was for visitors to get lost. They wandered in the streets for a little while until they came into a city square. There were plenty of people going about their business, and at the center of the square was a fine copper statue on a stone pedestal. The statue was in the likeness of a young, hunchbacked man wearing a top hat and large spectacles. Despite his deformities, his strict posture and wide, charming smile commanded respect for what must be a likable and intelligent fellow. The plaque on the pedestal read, "Better Born Square, dedicated to a man who gave his fortune and his life for the defense and prosperity of Wosington. Better born 20 BVP, died 1 VP. Betterborn was, of course, the alchemist character who went crazy at the end of Here There Be Signs, Here There Be Dragons. And at the very end, right before the final showdown between the characters, Betterborn gave all of his money to the town of Wosington, which was a big factor in making it as prosperous as it was to this day. And so a statue in a square was erected in his honor, was created in his honor. And also, the player behind Papercut the Knee Stabber, that was the same player who made Betterborn. And so that was a little bit of a fun fan service continuity there. Maybe not fan service, but sort of like fun, fun continuity stuff right there. And to this day, I still have that is part of the world now. I like doing that. Anytime that a player does something significant, like players, if I make a world for the players will affect it, and I will allow that to reasonably, take shape in the world itself. Anyway, Dithrash, rather thoughtful and actually no, I'm sorry, maybe not Papercut the Knee Stabber. It was Dithrash. That was the person who was behind Betterborn was also the person behind Dithrash. So yeah, Dithrash, ever thoughtful and curious, regarded the deformed statue and remarked, "Strangely beautiful." The players wandered some more and found what must be the judiciary. It was a large regal building with several dozen steps leading up to a row of stone pillars that nearly concealed the large brass double doors that led inside. Through these doors, the adventurers found an older female dwarf sitting behind a large desk. She regarded the group through her half-moon spectacles. Upon learning of the player's intent to register for the Wosington Pocket Monster Tournament, the dwarf, who called herself Ilda, routinely picked up a few paper forms for the team. She explained that this tournament allowed Tier 2 monsters, and that the team would have to pay an exorbitant fee or find a few sponsors to support their entry. I will say here that a lot of... I took a lot of cues from that Pokemon D&D campaign I found on YouTube. Maybe I'll see if I can find the link to it. If I do, I'll put that in the description. But sort of the plot and how this kind of went, I took a lot of cues from that for fun, They single-handedly inspired me to make this campaign. As short-lived as it was still fun. Anyway, once again, Dithrash was charmed and wanted to impress the dwarvish woman with his drum beat and subtle dance moves. Kelsier decided for fun to riot or augment the dwarf's appreciation for Dithrash's entertaining antics. Ilda seemed quite impressed, but managed to remain businesslike as she asked if the group had any more questions. They had none, so they left, with Dithrash trailing behind them to the beat of his own drum. The party walked out of the judiciary into another city square. In the center of this area was a stone statue of a human male paladin, garbed in stately armor with lion symbols. The plaque revealed the man's name to be Leo, the Lion Paladin, another character from Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons, except a non-player character, a former mayor or elder of the town. As the players wondered where they were going to find Tier 2 monsters, a crowd started to gather near Leo's statue. The players approached to see what the trouble was. At the center were two bickering boys, one in the green and red robes of Horrington Academy of Alchemy, and the other in the black and silver robes of the rival school Battlement Academy, which specialized in combat alchemy, also known as war alchemy. The players learned that this verbal battle was typical between students of the rival schools, but this one was getting particularly intense, beginning to rise above a shouting match. The threats became more serious, and the Battlement boy started to take out a monster ball. Just then, two police TikToks, which are the names I gave to metal automatons with blue police hats armed with powerful punches and a few concealed firearms, entered the scene. They recognized what was happening and remembered that settling an argument with a pocket monster battle in the square was not illegal as long as the public was safe and there were and as long as there were more than two people involved, to keep things sort of like, so that more people, there's more accountability. That was the rationale, and also that was me trying to get the players involved directly. Dothrash and Kelsier volunteered to help the Horrington boy, while Benaya and Papercut stepped forward to the Battlement boy. None of the players had much of a bias, except perhaps a small one towards Horrington only because they'd been there. The skirmish commenced. A winged kobold and a giant owl for Horrington, and a duodrone and a giant spider for Battlement. The Horrington boy brought out a fire snake, while the Battlement boy released animated armor. The fight was on. The fire snake against the animated armor alone proved to be an even match, although the flying monsters started to bring things in favor for Horrington. The armor took many hits without a problem, but it eventually fell apart, defeated. A sore loser, the Battlement boy reached to his belt for a second monster ball. He released it to reveal a ghast, an undead creature, a ghostly undead creature. Well, not ghostly, sorry. It's like a ghoul, but stronger. The players started to fight the newcomer, but the ghast quickly beat down the fire snake. Soon after that, the players began to overtake the ghast, and that is where the police TikToks interfered. They considered the battle over since the Battlement boy's animated armor was clearly defeated first. Disappointed, the Battlement boy stormed off peacefully with his defeated monsters in tow. The Horrington boy thanked the players and soon walked away down a main street. The players hoped that their monsters gained valuable experience from that fight. When they were at a quieter part of the city, the players decided to take a look at their monsters to make sure they were alright. They got a very pleasant surprise. Kelsier's giant owl had evolved into a fearsome owl bear. Benaya's duodrone became a mimic, gaining the ability to shapeshift and disguise itself. Papercut's giant spider became a phase spider and could now use a minor teleportation ability. Dothrash's winged kobold lost its wings, but more than made up for that with greatly increased strength and superior weapons in its new Lizard King form. Each of these pocket monsters were now clearly Tier 2 monsters. The players were thrilled with this new development. They retired for the night in one of the many inns and taverns in the city. They could have been at the Warring Waffle, the Pitiful Pancake, or even the Emerald Ape, to name a few, to take their next steps at being the very best. Now, unfortunately, this was the last session that actually happened, and I have I wrote a bit of an epilogue for in my personal notes here, and I'll read that. I also made a bit of a DM note here. Due to conflicting schedules and other commitments, some of the players weren't able to continue this campaign any further. As unfortunate as this was, I still consider this a successful campaign while it was running, because it was clear the players were really enjoying it. I had fun developing my homebrew world further from my previous steampunk campaign, and I hope to continue this development in future games. Besides, I didn't intend for this Pokemon campaign to last for very long anyway. That's why I've decided to offer this epilogue in order to wrap up the story and reveal the final events that I was planning for the players. Because the players weren't really involved in the events I will describe in this epilogue, I won't go into detail about what our heroes actually do. I will assume that they go straight for the quest, fight the monsters, and beat the bad guys, even though every season DM knows that the players always do the unexpected. So, enjoy this final installment of my Pockets and Monsters campaign. The next day began with a bright sunny morning, the perfect conditions for our heroes to win a national tournament. The players were able to find a few sponsors, perhaps Pith or any of the taverns. Then they entered a large stadium packed with a full house of excited spectators. It was the 5th annual Wosington Pocket Monster Tournament. Jawbreaker provided some entertainment with his futuristic rap-style music. Turns out he's a star throughout the country. And then the battles began. The players would fight several battles, some more challenging than others. The participants of this tournament have been around the block a few times, releasing more powerful monsters. I even made a page for like different monster evolutions and things like that. And I can name those as well after this. Actually, this turns out this video will be longer than I thought. Just reading things instead of summarizing it, but it's fun to read my notes. So anyway, if the players win the tournament, they would win lots of gold as well as the Wosington badge, a traditional crest that features a lion's face, a metal axe, bales of straw, and an emerald W on it. Soon after the tournament and the subsequent revelries that honor the victors, there would be a commotion near the center of Wosington in the older part of the city. A large ankylosaurus would erupt from the cobblestone ground, crashing into the buildings and spitting acid everywhere. The players, with the help of their monsters, would defeat the ankylosaurus. The citizens are very grateful, and several of them mutter something about informing the Lion Elder about these events. If the players don't seek out the Lion Elder right away, someone approaches them with a message that their presence is requested in his office. At the home and office of the Lion Elder, a butler answers the door and lets the party in. Behind a desk, the party meets an old man in his 80s. The more astute adventurers recognize this man as Leo, whose younger likeness was seen in the statue near the judiciary. Leo thanks the party for saving his city and asks them to investigate the cause of the attack. He fears this may be a repeat of a similar incident 50 years ago, especially since that previous episode occurred in the same area. Evidently, the acid-breathing ankylosaurus emerged from a small cave known years ago as Reptilia Cave. The cave had since been emptied and cemented over with a cobblestone road as the city expanded. The players agree to investigate the cave. They walk in and find it dark but empty. A short way into the cave, the ground is littered with jagged rocks and stalagmites. Difficult terrain. There is dead grass and charred earth everywhere, and the right side wall is covered in black marks. All of this is evidence of powerful spells cast decades ago, which there was a battle against frost giants in here in a previous campaign. Perhaps the old giant-sized footsteps had something to do with that. Soon they came upon a two-way fork. The right fork leads to a dead end with a large moldy animal bones and remnants of a large rusty cage. The left fork leads to another supposed dead end with piles of decomposed wood mixed with shards of glass. However, in this room, a recently carved opening into a tunnel was found. It may have been carved or blasted by magic or acid, it was hard to tell. Strange magic could be detected from through that opening, which was large enough for an ankylosaurus to walk through. Once the players step through the opening, a strange magical effect takes hold of each of them. They feel compelled to run deeper into the cave, and a magical force pushes them onward, causing them to run much faster than is physically possible. This seems to be a similar effect to 7-League Boots, which lets you just sort of run faster. On and on they go until the party reaches the other end of the tunnel. Once there, the magical effect stops and they crash into an opposite cave wall. Players have no idea how far they travel, but they find an ascending stone walkway nearby, so they would soon find out. The adventurers find themselves in the western mountains, near the entrance to a fortress carved into the rock. Only the front facade is visible. Who knows what could be inside? Clearly, this is where our heroes were meant to go. The fortress has a very fine craftsmanship and architecture inside, but it is filled with traps. Most of the obstacles involve stone or metal construct. The owner of this fortress is clearly fond of clay and stone golems, but seems to have a particular liking for iron golems. Some rooms have puzzles or riddles. One room would feature a large chessboard for an original game called Crosses and Straights. 3 iron golems would move around the board in straight lines, while 3 of the players would move around in diagonal lines. The aim was to capture the opposing pieces. So that's kind of a game I sort of invented. At the end of it all, assuming the players survive, is a large chamber with a huge iron golem sitting on a throne. The golem doesn't move, but the humanoid figure in front of it does. It is a black dragonborn wearing fancy purple robes befitting a wealthy magic user. The dragonborn called himself Aryon. It was he who set the ankylosaurus on Wosington, and he was preparing to send more formidable creatures into the city. He does all this in the name of Asmodeus, god of tyranny, former ruler of the 9 Hells. It was clear that Aryon, under Asmodeus' direction, was working to weaken all civilization. Aryon is a powerful sorcerer, and he activates the giant iron golem at times to try to crush the heroes. like not so much the whole golem, but like it would have moves to like do big punches or stamps or something like that. If Aryan is killed, the party can claim the fortress as their own and find a mountain of treasure there, as well as a few unique monsters, many of them powerful constructs, to catch. If Aryan were to prevail, he would continue his city assault as planned, but of course the players would never allow such conclusion. They would likely pull out all the stops for this guy. If Aryan at least escapes with his life, he teleports himself to a different plane of existence, the infernal battlefield of Archeron, where Asmodeus resides and bides his time. There are other cities and strongholds out there that the players could explore or find or battle new monsters. It's hard to say whether this Pocket Mon fad would last much longer, but it is clearly a great source of entertainment for the masses and a lucrative endeavor for those who are truly the very best, like no one ever was. The way things are going, these adventures are clearly well on their way. And that concludes the short-lived but fun Pockets and Monsters campaign. I have one more little campaign that I'll summarize in a little bit. But first, I want to kind of share like how I came up with monster evolutions. So I had Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 monsters were monsters that were challenge rating 1/8 to 1. Tier 2 were challenge rating 2 to 5. And Tier 3 were challenge rating 6 to 10. And for example, I had like a fire snake evolving into a fire salamander, evolving into a guardian naga. A Duodrone evolving into a Mimic, evolving into a Zorn. A Warhorse evolving into a Pegasus, evolving into a Unicorn. Mephits evolving into bigger elementals. A Winged Kobold evolving into a Lizard King or Queen, evolving into a T-Rex. A Vine Blight into a large plant shambling mound, into a Tree Ant. A Pseudo-Dragon into a Dragon Wormling, into a Young Dragon. A Giant Owl or a Giant Bear into an Owl Bear. Animated Armor into a Helmed Horror, into a Shield Guardian. Ghast into a Ghost, into an Invisible Stalker. Giant Spider into a Phase Spider, into a Drider, which is a Drow Spider, half Drow, half Spider. An Ape into a Barlgura, which is a Demon Ape, into a Giant Ape. And a Twig Blight into a Flare Crow. And I had the different kinds of Mephits and whatever. And you could evolve Mephits by combining two of them to create an elemental. And each of those elementals would evolve into a different creature. So an air elemental would evolve into a Deva, a celestial. An earth elemental into a stone golem, fire elemental into a fire giant, and a water elemental into an aboleth. So basically I just tried to find, things that kind of made sense for evolutions and things like that. So I will conclude. This is much longer than I thought it would be. Oh well. I'll conclude with a brief explanation of another short-lived campaign, which I called Arbitraria 71. So I had this idea for a campaign about a year ago, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there are, let's see, can I find it? Well, anyway, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there are all kinds of tables that you could roll, and you could use these tables to either get suggestions for features of a town, or you could even build a dungeon. You could build a whole campaign. Like it gives campaign ideas, dungeon ideas, adventure ideas, towns, weather, all kinds of things. Even ideas for non-player characters, ideas for villains. And so I wondered, what if you made a fully randomized campaign? What if you took all of these different tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide and rolled them randomly for different adventures and whatever, and see what happens? And I even found a random map generator online to create a random world, and everything would be randomly generated at the start, and I would, as a dungeon master, find some way to make it all work. I called it Arbitraria 71 because I imagined that Arbitraria would be the name of the country, and this would be kind of like how in Marvel you have Earth 616 or something. That's like one version of Earth, like parallel universes. I had the same idea for Arbitraria. The players for this campaign were playing in Arbitraria 71. But you could have, and I actually rolled a 100. I did a random number generator 1 to 100 to see which number would come up. You could have Arbitraria 67. You could have Arbitraria 3. You could have Arbitraria 84. Whatever. Making lots of different possible combinations. It was. I don't remember a whole lot. I rolled randomly and I tried to make things work. Like there were like overly powerful boss monsters as like, you know, that the party went against that way too early, so they had to find other ways to get around it and all that stuff. They came across fortresses, and you know that a fortress that I built from the sort of random dungeon generator inside the Dungeon Master's Guide and all that kind of stuff. Something I might try later, you know, at some future time. It was short lived because number one, people were starting to move out. Like it was a summer. People were kind of like moving out because they were graduating from college and stuff like that. And also it was sort of losing steam towards the end. I was starting to run out of ideas, and I was having a hard time like keeping track of all the randomness that I was generating. So I would try to keep better track of everything. But yeah, there you go. There are, and I mean, I've done one-shots before. I've done all kinds of things, but I'll share other stories at a later date. But for now, that concludes my story today. Thank you for being here. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day. All the best.